you in here have ever gotten a checkup? Just, you gotten a checkup. Okay. How many of you that when you went to the doctor, you don't like going to the doctor? You don't like it? Just wave it at me. I mean, because, man, if you don't like it, I do not like going to the doctor. Because whenever you go to the doctor, they do this thing like this. Have you ever heard a doctor, have you ever heard a doctor do, How many of you ever heard a doctor do, or he sits, have you ever been to the doctor and have him say nothing? Like you think, I didn't come here to the doctor to have you say nothing. I need you, please, talk to me. If I need communication, I need communication. It's really true. People ask questions about so many things in life, but one of the things that they don't ever ask is they don't ever ask about things when they go to the doctor. In the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse number 5, we began speaking about this last week. Notice this, what the Message Bible has to say. He said, test yourselves. Everyone say, I'll test myself. Notice here, he said, test yourselves to make sure that you're solid in the faith. Make sure that you're solid in the faith. He said, don't drift along taking everything for granted. You don't just take everything for granted. You make sure that you're consistently giving yourself a checkup from the neck up. All the time. Say, I need to give myself a checkup from the neck up. Okay, he said, give yourselves regular checkups. He said, you need firsthand evidence. He said, you need this evidence because not merely hearsay. This is one of the challenges I've had over the years. Have you ever had anybody say, when someone's name came up and you'd say, you know what, I'd really like to see them come to Christ, and someone else will turn around and say, oh, they're a Christian. And you're going, they're a Christian. Say, no, I mean, we need to, but then they turn around, they go and say, they're a Christian. And you're sitting there and you're going, every time I try to witness to this person, you tell me I don't need to witness to this person because you say they're a Christian. Well, yeah, but if they're a Christian, you're a figure skating champion. You just in the summer. I mean, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense because honestly, if you can't see a person's a Christian, then they're not a Christian. Say, I'm going to give myself a checkup from the neck up. He said, and you don't need mere hearsay that Jesus Christ is in you. He said, test it out. He said, and if you fail the test, then do something about it. It's an interesting thing that many people think that just because they grew up in America, they're a Christian. Well, just because you drive past McDonald's doesn't make you a what? You're not a French fry if you go past McDonald's. And you are also not a Christian because you were raised in America. America has been Christianized. I remember a friend of mine whose name is Gilbert Coleman. Some of you may remember the Bishop Gilbert Coleman. But he said to me, Robbie said, America has been Christianized. He said, but there's a far cry in between being a Christian and being Christianized. And I thought, boy, we need to give America a checkup from the what? From the neck up. So God has placed, one of the things I found out is that God has placed a reward on overcoming. In the book of Revelation chapter 2, just verse number 7, the end of the verse, he said, to him that overcomes will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. If you want that, say yes. Well, see, so he said, if you overcome, he said, I'm going to give you the right to eat from the tree in the paradise of God. Now, let me ask you again. If you want that, say what? Yes, okay. In verse 11, he said, to him that overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. If you want that, say what? Yes, okay, that's fine. In verse 17, he said, everyone who is victorious will eat of the manna that has been hidden away in heaven. And I will give to each one a white stone, and on this stone will be engraved a new name, that no one knows except the one who receives it. So if you want that, shout yes. Yes. You see, I want that. So I have to give myself a checkup from the neck up. I've got to make sure that I keep going over those things. So here are just 4 thoughts today about a spiritual checkup that need to be had. Now, you know, isn't it really true? How many of you have ever heard someone say to you when you were talking to them about something, they said, I know that. Have you ever heard that? Someone say, I know that. Say that with me. I know that. Sure, and you tell them something else, and then they turn around and they say, well, I know that. Well, then you decide you're going to take a different view at things, and you're going to go at it a different way, and then they turn around and they say, what? I know that. See, because they say, I know that, I know that, I know that. And then I finally say, time out. Now that you've told me the 6 things that you know, is there anything you don't know? They say, well, I don't know. I said, well, maybe I can help you with what you don't know then. But if you know everything that I'm asking you, why are things the way they are? Now, know this. How many of you like to talk to people about your dentures? Doesn't make a lot of sense for most people. Now we're drilling them in. I mean, we just do, we've got a whole bunch of, but there are certain things in life that you don't talk about. There are certain things that you have in your life that you don't want people to know, that you're not really interested in being able to make public about things. You know what? You don't mind people knowing. It's not the fact that people know. It's that all of a sudden what it is that it reveals too much to the wrong people. Have you ever revealed the right thing to a wrong person? And so there are 4 things. Everyone say 4 things I need to give myself a checkup from the neck up. Okay, here's number 1. Take a look. Number 1 is compromise is the pen that writes the story of your future disappointments. Compromise. Remember David in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse number 1. Do you know when you break routine, you begin to compromise? Routine is not just so you can say, every morning I get up and so that there's peace in the valley over here. I just get up and I make myself a cup of coffee. I go down there and I have a cup of coffee. And I have my cup of coffee and I stir, and if I can get the spoon to go through it, I just make it so thick, it's like pudding. I just love it, love it, love it. Man, I just put in myself my teaspoon of cream because I'm trying to lose weight. And then I just put in 4 packs of sugar because I didn't put in all my cream that I could have put in. And so I do all of that. I just said, but all of a sudden one day I don't do it. And something happens. Well, that's what happened to David. It says, it happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at home. You see, whenever you break your routines, you open a door that you don't want open. How many of you would say, I've had a door that should have never been opened? Say it. I've had a door that should have never been opened. It's because people break routine. And that's how it happens. Well, what about this fella named Samson? I guess he was Sam's son. I guess that's probably why his name got there. But in Judges 14 it says, now Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah. Some of you guys do not need to go down to Timnah. Timnah's a bad place for you to go. Don't go. He went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. You also need to be watching out for those daughters of the Philistines too. Some of you guys go, What's he talking about? The daughters of the Philistines? You'll find out. Verse 2, so he went up and told his father and mother, saying, I've seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore, get her for me as my wife. Now you have to remember this. Samson's parents understood that Samson was actually called by God to be a Nazirite. A razor must never touch his head. He actually must never drink wine, should not get through, and he must never deal with death and get around death. He said, now those are the three things that you must never do. But in order for Samson to go to Timnah, he had to go through a vineyard in order to do it. And when Samson went down to Timnah, he actually began to influence his parents over the fact of saying, get her for me. I want her as my wife. And Samson said, oh no, you get her for me. Well, when Samson said, you get her for me, his parents said, no, no, no. Some of you in this room have married the wrong person. Now, we're not going to stay there, because I don't want your depression, your disappointment to go into depression. Because sometimes what happens is that we don't listen. Have you ever been in a place in your life where you don't listen? How many of you wish you listened a time when you didn't? All right, just wave it to me. Just wave. See, because that's true. There are times what happens in life that what goes on is that there are times we should listen and we don't listen. And Samson was doing that. Because Samson needed to deliver God's people, but every decision that he made was always in a direction where he didn't deliver God's people. As a matter of fact, if you go through the life of Samson, you'll find out that Samson never did one thing for God during his life. He only killed more Philistines in his death than he ever did when he was living. But he didn't do one thing for God. Why? Because he wanted to make decisions that were opposed to the decisions he needed to make. He kept compromising. He kept compromising. Kept compromising. And what happened was that you have to remember what happened when Samson continued to compromise. In Judges chapter 16, verse number 20, the Bible says, she said, now after Delilah has convinced him 4 times, she begged him to say, tell me, where do you get your strength from? And in these 4 times, he said no. But the last time he finally said, I can trust you. Wrong-o. And all of a sudden what happened was, she said, Samson, the Philistines are coming upon you. Notice what he said. I'll get out of this as usual. I'll get out of this as usual and shake myself free. But notice what it says last. He didn't realize that the Lord had left him. Do you know, compromise is the pen that writes the story of our future disappointments. How many people do you know that you started walking with God with? They're really not walking with God anymore. Because compromise is the pen that is used to sign your name to a life of disappointment. So I'm sure many of you know people who compromised in their life, and now their lives are in shambles, even if they are together as a family. But what about Jesus? Where would we be, friends? Where would we be today if Jesus compromised and gave in to temptation? I'll never forget the time Linda and I we lived across the hall in this apartment complex that we lived in. I was a property manager in this particular complex, but we lived across the hall from this guy whose name was Jim. Now, Jim was an interesting guy. He was a He was an ex-convict from San Quentin when they actually had allowed San Quentin to be populated by humanoids. And so, but Jim actually, if you ever saw Jim, you would think that Jim was the devil. Jim gave you creeps. He did. He was a guy with absolute jet black hair. This guy had jet black hair, and he had a beard that was thin, that came down to his chin and came off with his mustache. And he looked just like the devil. I even thought that then, and I wasn't even a Christian. But I remember that what Jim did was, because Jim was he was an armed robber. And so Jim said to me one day, he said, what I want to do, he said, and this is what we're going to do. He included me in his future bubble. I was now actually being recruited for Jim's army of thieves. And so Jim actually said, this is what we're going to do. This day, at such and such a time, on Saturdays, what happens is that the Brinks truck comes and picks up all the cash from this particular jewel store that we lived near. So I'm not telling you which one it was, but it's still there. So it picks up this amount of money. I said, well, picks up that money. He said, yes, 2 o'clock every Saturday. He said, so not this Saturday, but next Saturday, what we're going to do is we're going to rob the store. I said, we are? He goes, yep, we are. I said, oh, that's really something. We are. He said, no, you don't need to worry about anything, though. I said, no. He said, all you need to do is drive. Because Jim was also a race car driver and taught me how to drive. So, I was kind of into him a little bit because he taught me how to get more out of my 1970 454 Corvette Rat. That's what I had at the time, in 1970 454 Corvette. Wish I had it today. But Jim said, this is what we're going to do. All you need to do is drive. You just need to do what I'm teaching. He said, I'll do all of it. I said, Jim, look, I don't want to kill anybody. He said, we're not going to kill anybody. He said, as long as they give us the bag, nobody's going to get hurt. No, nobody's going to get hurt as long as they give us the bag. And I'm thinking, yeah, man, but it's their job not to give you the bag, He said, nope, you don't have to worry about it. He said, this is what we're going to do. So, man, every day I'm going, man, how can I tell this guy I'm not going to rob this store with him? How am I going to do this? I can't really do it. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? So, man, Monday came. I'm absolutely tormented, and I'm thinking, here, Saturday is on its way. It's like, you ever hear a sermon about faith because of faith? Saturday's coming. Well, John Osteen actually did that. Joel's father did a sermon called Saturday's Coming. If you ever have a chance to hear it, it's a great message. But Saturday was the day that, all of the fulfillments of what you wanted in life were going to come to pass. But Saturday was coming for me, too. Saturday was the day we were going to rob the store, and all I needed to do was drive. Right? Right. Okay. So here's the deal. Tuesday comes. I'm thinking, because I don't even know what would happen if I told this guy I wasn't going to do it. So Wednesday comes and I'm going, I can't do it. I can't. Thursday, and Friday comes and I'm going, And Jim calls me and says, well, are you ready? I said, I can't do it. I can't. Because I couldn't do it. But now let me ask you a question. What would have happened if I did? What would have happened to some of the people you know if I did? You see, what you do matters. It matters to others. So I want you to make sure that you encourage people to not compromise. People think that forgiveness is easier than obedience. But you just don't know. Well, God forgives me. Who's talking about forgiveness, darling? I'm talking about your grandkids, not forgiveness. I'm talking about what people think about. Say, well, you know, he asked for forgiveness, you know. I know, but there's people without hundreds of thousands of dollars because of what people do, because they steal it from them. Yeah, but he asked forgiveness, so I think, you know, we should forgive him. Is forgiveness really the issue? Forgiveness, look, I cannot live in unforgiveness. Can you? No. Why? Because if you don't forgive, then you won't be. Okay, so it's not an issue about forgiveness. We don't got no deal there, right? Our deal is not forgiveness. Our deal is the fact of restoration. Not forgiveness. It's restoration. Because I'll forgive you. Forgiving you, it's really nothing. But forgiveness doesn't erase what you did. Forgiveness declares who you are. I'm willing to admit who you are, and I'm forgiving you for me being so stupid. So number 2, we must stop thinking about the cost of obedience and consider the price of disobedience. Because disobedience has a price. See, you can, just remember this, because we've talked about this before. Now, what we're talking about is a spiritual checkup. Say, I'm giving myself a checkup from the neck up. Okay, so that's really the deal. So when we need to stop considering the price or the cost of disobedience, but consider what may happen or how much disobedience really costs. I might be able to get some of the pressure off of me, but that doesn't help you. There's a price that goes along with this. But I can tell you this, that the prize is always greater than the price. It's always greater than the price. Many people complain that obedience is so hard. Look at that. Without any thought of how hard the consequences of disobedience will become. Now that's really a problem. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, here we have the story of Saul. Saul's a great king. He actually was the first king. God wanted to pick the best first. He stood head and shoulders over anyone else in the entire land. He was one who was humble. He was very, 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 very sweet. A great guy who followed his dad and actually went and sought after his father's lost donkeys. But this fella that he was with says, listen, let's go to the man of God and let's ask him where the donkeys are, because we can't find the donkeys. But he said, but I have no money. I don't have an offering to bring to the man of God. We cannot go. Notice what type of understanding that he had. That you don't go before God. If you want an answer, you don't go without an offering. If you want nothing, bring nothing. It's almost kind of like, how many of you ever been to a picnic where, you know, the Evite says, bring a dish for all to share? No dish, no eat. Hey, you didn't bring nothing, man. You can't have anything either. But then, what happened with Saul? You know, the Bible said that Samuel spoke to him and said this from the Lord. He said, now when you were small in your own eyes, did I not make you king over all of Israel? When you were little in your eyes. When you became cool, you don't know, but that C just changed to an F. You also became a fool. And so verse 23 of 1 Samuel 15, he says, for rebellion, this is the man of God speaking, he said, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. He said, because you have rejected the word of the Lord has also rejected you. Man, isn't that something? Say, I'm giving myself a checkup from the neck up. Boy, how cool that is that. I mean, really think about it. Never forget this. Many times what happens is people believe they have the right to make decisions. Isn't that true? This is my life. How many of you remember Manfred Mann? Some of you guys remember Manfred Mann. You remember Manfred Mann. How many of you remember the animals? I'm not talking about the zoo. Okay. But he sang this song and he says, it's my life and I'll do what I want. It's my mind and I'll think what I want. See, people have the idea that they can make a decision, but remember this.
If you are in the Chicago area, we would love for you to join any of our services. We have a 5 p.m. service on Saturdays, and on Sundays we have a 9:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. service. We also have midweek services on Wednesday at 7:15 p.m. at locations around Chicago and Northwest Indiana. To find out more about FHC, like us on Facebook or go to our website at fhclife.org. To partner with RTM, visit robthompson.org/partner or call our office at 708-614-6000. We look forward to seeing you very soon.